Hello there, this is Scott with Hi-Lux Optics, back from SHOT Show. As I'm sure you can guess, in order to take a rifle to SHOT Show, we do need to remove the firing pin to make sure everything stays safe at all times. With the kind of rifles we work with, sometimes removing and reinserting the firing pin may take a strange and excess amount of effort to get done. Boy, those springs on the 85 high wall are something else. Since those rifles were handled by hundreds if not thousands of people, and the sights were messed with, moved around, and all sorts of other things, I figured this is a good time to put the firing pins back in place, give the rifle a good once-over to make sure it's all in working order, and then reinstall the sights, make sure Loctite is applied where it's needed, everything is aligned, and then we can take it to the range this Friday and get them zeroed all over again. Right now, I have a nice bag of different firing pins in front of me. And I'm just going to be pulling them out one at a time, and we'll deal with that rifle when it comes to it. I'd like to take this time to share some stories about those rifles while I'm putting them back together because, boy, they are pretty and I do like them. Well, without much further ado, let's see what's first on the agenda here. I feel like I'm drawing for a bingo board. We have the Henry H001. This is going to be an easy one. I'll run off for a second to grab the rifle. I've already gotten all my tools out here in front of me, and then we'll get cracking. Ah, the Henry. This is a lovely old rifle. Not as old as some of them, but I've had it longer than I care to admit, because then you'd know my age. Well, putting the firing pin back in should be pretty straightforward. My hands are a little shaky this morning. We had an uncharacteristic 44 degrees in LA, and I was definitely not dressed appropriately. That's all right. It's a good way to warm back up. Now, getting this firing pin in, you don't even need to disassemble most of the rifle. Kind of punch out this back pin, put a spring in place. There you go. Afterwards, I'm going to put one of the old black scopes on this, the 3 or the 6 power. There we go. Now the H001 and the Henry Golden Boy have pretty much the exact same firing pin setup. So if I pull that one next, it should be equally easy to get this installed. Oh, something's sticking where it ought not to be. That's usually a sign that something's going on in there. There we are. Now I just need you to stay still for a second. This rifle has really survived just a heck of a lot more than I thought it would. I don't even know how many rounds I put through this thing. Definitely north of 10,000. Gone through a few boxes of ammo in its day. There we are. Now, like all rim fires, this one should not be dry fired, but with that crossing pin in there, it tells me it's in the right place, so this should work just fine. We'll center that a little bit. Oh goodness, I'm chasing my own tail here. Okay. Now, as for the scope, got it in the box up yonder. Let's just get... There we go. Got to figure out my setup here. I've got a little bit too much equipment. Of course, the recording equipment doesn't really help either. Got to take yonder tag off. Out of curiosity, how often do y'all take apart your rifles? Whatever the reason happens to be, I'm just curious how often it does happen. I think with shows and doing little modifications and whatnot, we probably fully take apart most of our rifles every 6 months or so. Some of them a little more often than others. Okay. Actually, I should probably check all these first. We had one fella come through, and for whatever reason, he just really wanted to rotate the scopes. And he did. It's kind of fun getting them aligned again afterwards. Okay, you're fine. For those of you who haven't been to SHOT Show, it is an absolute joy of all the different firearms and accessories and ammo manufacturers and everything else you could ever imagine, spread across way too many floors in a convention center and hotel. And unless it was your full-time job to look at this show, there is no way you are going to see everything. There is just way too much. Some of the people, like in a booth next to ours, had one of those shooting simulators, one of those indoor laser kind of things. And yeah, we may have played that too often. But that's okay. We all need practice. Now, it is a little strange doing this facing away from me. But a flathead is a flathead. Okay. Of course, I'm not going to be able to zero this here, and being a lever action, I'm also not even going to be able to bore sight it. But at the very least, I can get the eye relief set up, get the reticle aligned, and just make sure we're hitting the ground running when we take it to the range to get it zeroed. Let's see where we're at. No, that's about right. Okay. So, not a lot of moving parts, not much to check or look through. Just want to do one last piece here. I gotta say, having the right bits for your screwdriver definitely makes all of this work just a whole lot easier. I know for a long time I was just using my Leatherman, and it's fine, it gets the job done, but there's something about having the right sized bits that just makes everything work that much better. Okay, that's the Henry. What is next on the agenda? Draw again. Kind of like this random thing. What do I feel like it's going to be? There's a lot of rifles out there. Who are you? Ah, the Winchester 73. I don't remember this one outright. This may take a little bit of poking around to figure out how the firing pin goes back in, but done it before. We'll get there. I'll be right on back with 73. Okay, I think we've got everything in order here. Got the Winchester 73, 357 Magnum. Age-old pistol caliber carbine. You're good. Now this, I don't 100% remember how it comes apart, but I got a good idea. Yeah, I'll leave the mounts on. Now I should have mentioned, in the previous rifle, I was using the rimfire mounts and the 6-power all-black short scope. This one, I'm going to be going two-tone. I like how the gold eyepiece matches the inside the block here. I can already see there's one screw I gotta have replaced. You're a little chewed up. 73, side gate, left. Okie dokie. You look like about that size. Now, it's not always applicable, but I do encourage people to learn the inside of their rifles and how they work. Sometimes something goes wrong, and it's just nice to be able to poke around in there and maybe get it right or figure it out. Especially around us. there aren't exactly a whole slew of gunsmiths available. Alright, well, let's get that out of the way. Okay. Now, if I recall, there should just be, yep, a crossing pin there. So I just take these little link actions out. I think this is still technically called a toggle link action. I know it's not the 66, but it's close enough. There's you. Now once I get those separated, I should just be able to pull that back, drop the firing pin in. Yeah, it feels right. Well, nothing to do but hammer. That looks like about, we'll go with number 4. Excuse the noise. Let's start. There's a little tooth in there that holds everything together. Now the first time I was taking this rifle apart, I was looking at the schematics for a different version of this rifle from an entirely different decade. So I was banging away at this pin, not figuring out why it couldn't just move where I needed it to. Okay, let's get you out of the way. Now most of these firing pins, they've got a spring that's kind of holding them back. And when the hammer hits, push that firing pin against the spring. So even though I don't remember if this is explicitly how it goes, I'm very confident if I just put it in like so, everything should work out. Unfortunately, it doesn't give me a whole lot of room for my hands. Yeah, that's definitely got some spring pressure there. Now you go in like so. I think this is going to be the tricky part. There's just not enough room for me in here. So I gotta keep using these little needle nose pliers. Come on. Just got to get it compressed enough that I can slide this tooth in. But that spring should provide a good amount of pressure there. Oh, come on now. Fight me. Yeah, you're definitely going like that. Okay. Third time's the charm. That's why I rotate. Yeah, some of these rifles are a little bit touchy. There we go. This has a just sort of an extension bar that goes back to where the hammer is. Locks up here inside of this little toggle link action here. You have a pin going through holding the tooth in place, and then the firing pin is up here. Hammer hits the back. It should be, yep, that does make the firing pin go out, and does make that little tooth fall. Alright, that was probably not the smartest thing to do. But we'll get it back together again. Yep, like so. Oh my. Now we just got to get that pin back in place. Now, truth be told, this is among my favorite times to be working with rifles. Taking them apart, putting them back together. It's about level, a little bit more. Now a lot of things in here don't actually screw together. They just kind of fit together with pressure and darn tight tolerances. Like these links that actually connect the lever to the rest of the bolt mechanism, they fall out. There's nothing holding on to them. If you don't have those walls in place, they just come right apart. That's okay. We know it works. Now this is a top jet, so the scope is going to mount up a little bit different from your conventional scope. It has to be offset to the side so that it stays out of the way of the casing when it goes flying through the air. Yep, that's all right. Holding these side plates in, there is a single screw. Just goes across the whole thing. Yeah, kind of like that. The only unfortunate thing about this screw, despite how easy it is to take it apart and put it back together, is those plates are just kind of being held in there until you put the screw. And I have been known to push that plate out and have to put it back in again. Okay, now that that's done, get the safety on, and it's time to do the scope. We're going to be doing a 2-tone scope, crescent cut mounts. All in all, should just go on pretty easy. Really got to set this table up different. Okay. Let's first make sure the mounts are nice and stable. Now this front one goes into the rear dovetail and placed in the rear sight, and this one you got to take the dust cover off to make it go on. That's like 2. Nice. So the actual mounting is very simple. And it's about 7-inch spacing as well, so the adjustments are going to stay about 1/4 inch away. Now, these ones are all tight. I'm not going to Loctite these. It's not a whole lot of recoil, and the scope is built to slide, so that takes even more weight away. Okay. Ah, yes, that's right. So we're going to have a second version of these rear mounts that look quite similar to this, but the facing and the indexing a little bit different. I think I might have gotten these mixed up. I'm supposed to put it on this rifle. But that's okay. Not too difficult to change if I need to. Now for crescent cut mounts, I always recommend that you shake it a little bit while you're tightening it on. That way the crescent gets nice and centered on the cut. Then I've got this tool here, and just finger tight, gives you a little bit of a lever. Comes with all the scopes that have the crescent cut. Front ring, likewise. So you get close, just wiggle it in place, and finish tightening. It's not quite like mounting a scope on a Picatinny rail. It's not like there's a regular number of teeth, so you just got to make sure it finds its one perfect tooth. Sliding works good. Check that top cap real quick. Ah, yes, a little loose. Okay. finally do the eye relief and level the reticle. I think I'll do eye relief first. Scopes like this, they're built to slide. The rearmost position when you pull it back, that's known as battery. Battery is the essentially normal position when you're just getting set up and started. That's about right. Move it forward a smidge. Moving these forward, or backward, or leveling the reticle is all pretty easy. There's a little screw here for the lock ring or the sliding lock ring. Just gotta loosen that up. Once it's loose, then you get the scope position wherever you need it. Level out that reticle. It does make it a little difficult that it's offset. Everything seems a little uncentered. But just something to get used to for these kind of rifles. And it does help that there's not a whole lot of recoil. Couldn't imagine the 1903 with the Warner and Swayze scope. Oh man, that scope bite must have been something else. Anyway, another one ready to go. Once I get these caps on, do a final look at the rifle, and choose the next one. Now the previous year, so January of 2022, we had this rifle up. Someone was putting it on the wall, I'm not really sure what happened, but it just fell right on that buttstock. I've had to replace the wood since then, got a little scuffed up. So it doesn't quite match the grain on the front and the back. That's okay, we'll wear it in. Every other screw seems to be in good shape. I think it's ready for the range. Okay. Now, what is next on the agenda? Do another bingo pull here. And if you selected Browning 92, then you are going to have to wait because this thing has more spring pressure than any of them. I'm going to need another pair of hands on that, so we'll leave that for later. It's okay, let's see. Behind door number 4, 85. Now this also takes a fearsome amount of pressure. I really like working on the 85. I'll do the 85 now. I'll get as far as I can and then I'll call Chris in so I can finish it up. Be right on back with the 1885 high wall. The 85 high wall. Good Lord, I like this rifle. 4570, it's got some weight to it, but you still get that kick. Now this rifle, for whatever reason, the firing pin is essentially the last thing to install. So unlike the previous rifles, I'm gonna have to pull this whole thing apart just in order to get this block out. And I'll need to call Chris in later. I'm gonna need him to help hold it while everything gets pulled apart and put back together actually. On this rifle, we're gonna be putting the 20 power Unerdal style, the target spot. A big old scope's gonna be going on this thing. That's good, because I kinda want to take this out to 1,000 yards again. Okay. Got some screws here that are wearing down. Probably because I wasn't always using the proper bits. So really that's on me. Okay. It feels like you. A little smaller. All in all, this rifle doesn't actually have many parts involved. It's definitely not as many as most lever actions. But the thing is put together so that when you close that breech block, this thing is essentially like a big steel brick. It could handle a lot more pressure than it's currently taking. And this barrel, well, we use this rifle for a lot of testing. So this barrel has been drilled and tapped for so many different things. You know, way more holes up here than I need. I think also change in weather might have swelled the stock a little bit. It's just a little tighter than it ought to be. But we'll figure all that out as we go along. Now the stock I need to remove so that I can access some of the sear components. And the sear needs to be removed because it's catching on the block. The block needs to be removed so that I can get to the firing pin, and in order to remove all that, I have to take out the trigger mechanism. So we are really going to be pulling this thing basically all the way down, except for the foreguard here. I don't technically need to remove that. There's a flat spring under that keeps pressure up against this lever. It is just a hell of a strong spring. There's probably some special tool I'm supposed to use to make sure that everything gets held down right. In the past, I used a C-clamp with a few strips of rubber, and it didn't really work out. So now I just use human power. I hold it in place, and Chris drops the crossing pin in. And that's the trigger. Now, sear needs to come out. And there's a flat spring holding the whole sear block in place. I need to loosen it to get it back in, but I'm not going to loosen it yet because I do not want to drop it and have to figure out which direction is appropriate. Holy cow, that thing is tough to tell sometimes. Now, that sear block is just held in place by a little pin and some spring pressure. So ideally, you should just be able to knock this out right quick. Now the good thing about leaving your pin puncher in place is you can then make sure everything stays aligned. Very nice. This side down. Okay. Not much left except this final block here. Now it does have a little set screw holding that pin in place, and if you don't remove the set screw, you're just going to be hammering away for nothing. I've learned that lesson. Back when I first took this thing apart years ago, there was not like a guide or an instruction book or anything else that was telling me how to put this rifle together, so it was a lot of play it by ear. Which I know is not always the best thing to do when you're talking about things like firearms or cars. This is also a nice old design that should be something you can fix with old world technology. Couldn't be too bad. Okay, now for the coup de grace. We have this crossing pin here. Oh boy, it's a lot of spring pressure. Let's see what happens. Getting it out is easy. Getting it back in is going to be the tough part. There we go. Now there's this extractor bar that sits alongside the block, and it does not like to move. So we got to do this very technical method called wiggling it a whole bunch. Oh, come on now. There we go. The very technical, very professional. Wiggle it until it falls out. This little extractor brick, my goodness. Fitting that thing back in is always a little tough. Got to get it positioned. There we go. Oh, we'll have to do that later. Firing pin, literally the last thing. I still have to take this thing apart. Oh, and I've got too many tools out here. I'm starting to lose track. Nah. Look like you're about that big. Yep. Now this rifle, all things being told, very beautiful fitting on all the components. These two screws on the face of that little breech plate, good God, tight fit. No Loctite or anything, they just can't move. Maybe time to oil this thing. We cleaned these out before we went to SHOT Show, but I don't know how properly we actually oiled them. Yeah, a little bit. So. That firing pin, just like all the others, goes in there. Little spring on the front to hold it back, and then when the hammer hits the back, boop, overpowers the spring. Nothing too terribly complicated. Firing pins have not had a reason to advance in a very long time. Now, because this is so tough to take apart and then put back together, this is the kind of component where we're really going to need to make sure that everything is perfect, so that I don't have to do this again for another 6 months. Even though secretly, or I guess publicly now, I actually really like it. This rifle is just a marvel of engineering, my goodness. I'm not sure if they've always been built this way, but if they have been, hats off to the designer, really. Yeah. Let me make sure. Of course, in the previous recording, good, you're still going. I managed to pull the cable out, which is why you'll notice the audio switch over to the camera audio. Trying to make sure I don't tug on that cable here. Now we just put everything back in reverse. There we go. Turns out getting it back in was easier than taking it out this time. I wonder, can I do this all by my lonesome, or is that last little bit of spring pressure just going to be too much? Oh, goodness. Nope, looks like it may have been too much. I'll try it from the other side. Because of where that set screw goes, there's this extra little lip on here, and I think it's just catching. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm not quite holding it in the right spot. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna need to get Chris in on this. Yeah, okay. I'll be right on back. Okay, that's your pin, this side up. It's everything you could possibly need. There we go. Here, pull it out. Gonna have to hammer it, I think. There you go. Beautiful. Yeah, let's go and finish that up. There we go. Nice. All right, thank you. Chris, everyone. So I'll have you back for the 74, and then I don't know if I want to do the 92 on camera. That thing was just a monster. Thank you. Okay, everyone, that was the tough part. After this, it's all just timing. Trying to get them out of the cases?
Yeah, so I can clear up some of this room for you.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just taking them piece by piece. This rifle, good Lord. How many rounds do you think we've shot through this thing? 600?
I'd say like excess of 500. Sounds about right.
Anyway, a whole lot. It's managed to survive all that, so I'm gonna have to Loctite these blocks on later. Previously we had the long scope. Oh, sorry, that was the camera. I'm sort of blabbing to it, I think. Okay. Two. Getting this little sear block back in place is always a little tricky, because you can't actually see what you're doing. All you can do is just kind of put it nose in and hope you got it in the right spot. Apparently, I don't. There's this flat spring that keeps pressure against this, and it is not very cooperative. So usually now, when I'm trying to put this block back in, I loosen up that flat spring. I've done that here, but it doesn't seem to be helping me any today. There we go. That's the sear block. Now I'll just get you tightened back up. I think I did 2 1/4 turns. 1, okay. Good, nope, oh, obviously. I spoke too soon. The sear block was not fastened, even though it was acting like it was. Okay, now you're definitely in there. Good. Now we can tighten this back up. Nice. May have to play around with that later. Oh, now for the last bit of fun. This trigger block, it's got this fun little thing you can do in order to get it to fit. So this up here is what pushes on the whole sear mechanism and everything. And it ties into the trigger. Technically they're separate, but there's a groove on that trigger where if you kind of preload it and then pull the trigger backwards, opposite of normal direction, you can recess that. And you just slide it right on in. Kind of like that. Of course, I forgot the other cardinal rule, that I need to have the action partially engaged. Not all the way up like I just did. There we go. I'll line up the holes, put the screws back in, then the stock, everything else nice and straightforward. Yeah. And again, all these, not Loctiting them. They hold together pretty darn well. Now that crossing pin for that little sear block, that has scooted to the side on me a little bit. But even from the outside, you can just kind of take your hand, push it in place, you're done. Once I get these screws in, we'll give the action a little test before I put the stock on. That flat spring can be surprisingly touchy if it's out of line. Okay, moment of truth. Good. Yep. Nothing's loose. Cool. Now just for the stock. Then, okay. Then it'll be time for the scope. Actually, before I go any farther, there's one other screw I want to remember to replace. That sear spring screw. So I've only touched it a few times, only during disassembly like this. For whatever reason, it is very chewed up. It must be a soft metal. Screw on bottom, simple wood screw, just holds the stock. The one on top is the one that goes all the way through, connects that tang there to the trigger group. This one, let's see how it goes if I put this one in first. Usually I do this one last because wood is a little more flexible than metal most of the time. I'm curious now. And this screw, yes, okay, I have it marked down. Yeah, that's going to be a tight fit. Now there's not a lot on the outside of this rifle that can really be messed with. And most of the screws that might potentially be loose, I mean, in the course of taking this thing apart, we took them out and put them back in. So I'm not really worried about the state of the rifle. Really, the big thing is going to be these blocks up on the barrel here. The 20 power scope, it's pretty darn heavy as far as scopes go. The 85 high wall, 4570, has a fair amount of kick as far as rifles go. You put those two together, you've got a big heavy thing right around by your face. I'm going to want to make sure those are in tip-top shape. After this rifle, I think I'm going to clean all this up a little bit. It's time. Okay. Get that rifle stuck in there. It's a bit front heavy. And before I go any farther, let me see if I pulled that cable out. No, we're good. Testing. Yeah. Now, this is the box for the scope we're going to put on it, and as you can tell, it is not small. This is 20 power. Uses the same mounts as our 8 power Gen 2. Same rings, I should say. And yeah, it's got some weight to it. Let's take that off. Now this technically will go on the same crescent cut mounts as like the two-tone would. And though I've had the two-tone on this rifle, I have not had this scope on the 73. Now I'm curious. I gotta try that sometime. Okay, well you sit off over there. My Loctite, because I do not remember if I Loctited these screws. I don't think I did. We're going to go through and Loctite each one, because for this amount of recoil, it's really best to just be on the safe side there. No, I did not Loctite them. Okay. I think we had these holes drilled, I don't know, like 3.5 years ago. We've had, I don't know, I've probably taken these blocks off and put different blocks on, I don't know, 20 times? And they've held up pretty well. Kind of glad I went with the 840 screws. Okay. Now these blocks are, strictly speaking, not exactly right for this setup. I took a couple of the oversized blocks from the 1903. You know, the front block's taller than the rear. Took a couple of those, put the bottom on a little sander or miller or something, took it down. The holes are meant for a size 6 screw. Drilled those out to fit a size 8. And that's it. That's the beauty of these old scopes. You can just kind of play around with all the pieces until everything fits right. Let's put a little pressure on that. I don't want to go too high. Cool. Do the same for the front there. Also not Loctited. I'm glad I checked. Last thing I want is the scope coming off with 4570. Now realistically, I could just leave these blocks on and throw just about any of our short scopes on here. So they're all going to fit that crescent cut. But I only like to use these really tall blocks with a 20 power because of the size of the objective. For the other ones, I like to switch out to the blocks that are .192 tall. Just get it real low. Especially with the way the stock is designed. It comes from a time when scopes weren't exactly commonplace. It's kind of built for the sight back on the tang there. Strangely enough, this rifle doesn't even have holes drilled for that sight back here. Make sure that's nice and tight. Good. Now this scope too is built to slide. It's got the spring here, so it kind of pushes itself back into place. You don't need to pull it to battery. I personally, when I take it to the range, I'm going to disengage that spring. So I like pulling it back for each shot. Plus it's a single shot, so Not exactly losing a lot of time there. Same thing, use that little tool. Of course, when you're doing it, you should probably have the cross bolt on the same side that you're on so that you can see what it is you're doing. Boy, it is tough doing things when they're facing away from you. Okay, let's check the eye relief. I think, if I recall, this is about right. And the reticle should be level. It's got the Pope rib up here keeping it aligned. You can level your reticle by moving this rear ring when it's loose. Okay. A little forward, but that makes sense. This is more of a bench shooter anyway. Okay. That looks like it's ready to go. Let's check a few of these last little screws here. Always remember to put your tools away. Hate missing that one piece. Yeah, you're fine. Okay. What is next on the list? What do we got left? Winchester 94, Henry Golden Boy, 03, the Browning 92, I set that one aside. We've got the Sharps. I don't remember what else we had up. But we're doing the Henry Golden Boy. Nice. That's an easy one. Okay. I'll put this away, grab the Henry Golden Boy, and we'll pick right back up where we left off. Okay, the Henry Golden Boy. Remarkably similar to the Henry H001, except, well, the octagonal barrel, a few other little factors, and one very frustrating characteristic. Chris has used this to beat me in lever action poker more times than I would care to admit. That's okay, I'll get him someday. Wrong size there. Unfortunately, a lot of these rifles, you don't need to do a lot of disassembly in order to get the firing pin back in. Of course, it does help. There we go, if it's cooperative. Okay, same idea. We've got this little push bar kind of thing. Probably even the firing pin. Just kind of a rectangle that crimps the edge of the case. And of course a spring, and like most of these other rifles, spring keeps the firing pin back. When the hammer hits it, hammer overpowers the spring. Yep. Now it would probably help if my hands were just a little bit smaller. But you work with what you got. Just like so. Let's get that centered a little better. Nice. On top of this, we've got this adapter piece that allows you to mount an old Malcolm scope up on this without having to drill or tap anything. It doesn't have that 11mm rail like the H001 has, so it does have the rear dovetail for the iron sights. Still, this works out pretty darn nicely. Just gotta make sure everything's tight before I move forward. You know, this being 22 and all, it's not like it has a whole lot of recoil. But I'd hate for that to loosen up and have that be the reason that I beat Chris, as opposed to actual plain old shooting. This rifle does have, I'd call it about 2 MOA. precision, depending on the ammo you're using. The Henry H001 really doesn't care about the ammo. It sits at flat 2.5, just very constant. And of course, Golden Boy, we gotta throw the 2-ton scope up on there. Brass. It only makes sense. Yeah, grab the bench. Let's make sure not to detach that cable again. Okay. Now this scope does use crescent cuts, just like the Unervals. Same idea, we're just going to rock it around a little bit while tightening it up. And once again, it's facing away from me, so bear with me here. Okie dokie. This scope is also built to slide, which I realized for 22, you don't really need. But it comes with the scope, and we haven't really had a reason to change it on the ones we mount up on the Golden Boy. Worst case, you could push this ring forward, it just had to be a stopping point on the back end, as opposed to returning the battery. Ooh, yes, this is a very nice rifle. I really like what Henry did with this. Especially the way they designed this receiver. It's just like one big chunk of metal. You could, if you undo the screws, lift this whole receiver off, and I mean, you'll take the bolt with it, but I swear those were half the way this rifle comes from. Eye relief is good. I'd call that pretty level. Yeah. So nothing much else to do here. I'll check to make sure a few of these screws are tight, and then we'll move on. Now, if I wanted to win a lever action poker, the cheap way, this would be a great time for me to do something like remove the firing pin. That's just not fair. That's not an even sport. All good there? All right. Now I'll put this away after picking the right. We're getting down to the end here. I don't even have to look at it. And this is the 03. Yep, that's the 03. Nice. That's probably one of the easiest of all. So I'll go grab it. I'll be back in a second with the 1903 A1 that we'll be mounting up an 8-power universal scope. Now, it has come to my attention in the previous recording that I once again pulled out the audio cable. I seem to have a bad habit of doing that. So I will try to make sure that I don't do that here, but no promises. Now, replacing the firing pin on the 03, it's actually pretty easy, especially when you remember to let pressure off by dropping the firing pin. We had a fake one put in there. It's got the tip all ground down, so no chance of it hitting anything. Oh, let's see. Yeah, you look like you go this way. Now, the only real problem here is I keep this thing pretty nicely greased. Oh, that grease does not like letting me get a grip. Now, this rifle I brought to a CMP match. But really, we should use it a lot more often than we actually do. It shoots very nicely. Not all ammo agrees with it, but the stuff we've been feeding it seems to work pretty okay. The Greek especially. Greek ammo is fantastic if we're not hand loading. Yep. Seems fine. Now these blocks, I know they're Loctited in. And I don't recall seeing anyone stop by the booth with a bunch of tool work to undo it, so I'm just going to proceed ahead as if they're fine. Same for the rest of the screws on here. I'm pretty sure they're in tip-top shape. This one as well, just going to throw up here on the bench. No, that's probably where I keep pulling that cable out. So we're going to let that sit there and do its own thing. Actually, is the audio still going? That's really a big question. Yeah. Okay. Well, so this, crescent cut blocks. We didn't provide a lot of room here. Didn't really cut this down enough to make it fit. Sometimes I just gotta tap that a bit to get it on. That wood is clamping onto it pretty darn tight. I'm not gonna be able to rock it the same way that I would for basically any other setup we've done so far. That's all right. The scope slides quite nicely. Okay. Just make sure that's centered. Nice. And yes, I realize I'm turning it towards me this time, but darn it, I need it. Okay, now this, I also remember, should be perfect for the eye relief. We usually put this last little lock ring up here right at the end. That sets it up perfect. Oh, well, bye-bye. I'll pick it up later. Yep. That's all right. Well now, the only question left is what rifle to pick next. We're really running down to the end game here. Got the 92, pulled the firing pin for that. We've got the 74. Do I have any other rifles to go through? I don't think so. I'm gonna dump them all. Okay, 74. Ah, the Winchester 94. Okay. Now we have two 94s. And this other one that I pulled the firing pin out of, it's actually going to need some repairs. We had a moment where a part fell out that ought not to be in a falling mood. However, we've got this 94 that's still perfectly fine. Let's do it. Let's do the 94 first. The sharps, likewise, are going to need a lot of pressure, almost in the exact same way as the 85. So I'll wait for Chris to be ready for that. And with that, I'm off to go grab another rifle. Well, what we have here is a Winchester 94. It's a nice rifle, but has been catching on the case rims as of late. At some point soon, I may want to take this all the way apart and see what exactly is going on in there, but today, I'm just not feeling it. So, now Winchester 94, it's just a darn nice old rifle. The 30-30 packs a pretty nice wallop. Of course, it's not the most accurate. I think, at best, out of this rifle, we've pushed the ammo out to like 400 yards. And, Yeah, it wasn't doing great at 400, but it was still hitting the steel target pretty well. I'm trying to remember how far I have to take this thing apart in order to get that pin in. I think I should only need to do two things. One, remove this cross pin that keeps the lever pushed up into the bolt carrier group. Actually, that begs the question. Is it called a bolt carrier group in a lever action? It's called bolts? Like, what's the word for that whole mechanism there? I've been calling it the bolt carrier group, but I don't know that that's actually right. That's right. The last thing I have to do. I've got to knock out that pin there going through the lever so I can drop it just a little bit farther. There we are. We're going to need a bigger one. That looks about too small. Nice. So with these two, I should just be able to carry on. No, a little bit more. I'm really trying not to remove it all the way, but I may have to. Hey, there we go. Now, if I remember right, I should just be able to drop it right in there. Looks clear. We're going for it. Now, it's got this little spring return bit at the end. At least I think it does. That's what fell out of the other 94. This one it has not fallen out of. So I think I should just be able to drop this in, give it a little spin, and call it a day. Okay, you're looking good so far. You line up nicely. Now this has to find its home in the dark. That looks like about right. Well, it's not quite right. That lever is not lining up exactly. Oh, goodness. Why are you giving me trouble? So you're fine. You're lined up. That's all good so far. Let's just close this up and see where that takes us. It's just really not agreeing with me today. What is going on with you? It's like it's off by just like a 1/4 inch. I don't want to pull this thing apart. I'm trying to remember what it looks like in here. I pulled it apart a long time ago. So that's that groove. That is kind of the problem with these old rifles. There's a lot of things that don't exactly make a whole lot of sense. There we go. Now you're happy. I need the wooden block. So now I should just be able to knock this sucker back in, put the cross pin up top, call it a day on that. That looks about right. Do you close? Yes, you do. Okay. Now for that pin. Now the pin occasionally is a little touchy because the lever is loose until you put it in. That looks like it'll work. Nice. So at the end of the day, it was a little easier than I thought. Just the lever was not quite cooperating there at the beginning. That's okay. Now, this particular rifle, it's got some years on it. I don't know exactly how old it is. I should probably look it up at some point. But I think it's in the neighborhood of 60? 60 years old, maybe? I mean, it still shoots beautifully. The barrel's getting a little worn down. We took a look inside the bore. But these aren't exactly tack drivers anyway, so that's not the end of the world. Oh, yes. Now on this setup, we've got something a little unusual going on. I took one of the black scopes with the regular mounting that comes with it. I switched out the rear mount to be like one off of the 73 right now, but like off the two-tone scope. So I'm using two different sets of Winchester 94 mounts here. One that goes into the posa cut and one to use the crescent cut. So, bit of a dual system, I guess. Anyway, it's been working out fine, so I'm sticking with it. Although at some point, I may want to switch this forward one to a sliding mount. I haven't really made up my mind there. Okay, posa cuts. You're about that thick. No, you're not. You're much thinner than that. Who am I kidding? Nice. As it turns out, mounting up these scopes is not terribly difficult. Just sometimes rifle's got some weird tolerances to it, and speaking of tolerances, I should check to make sure the rest of these screws are copacetic. You're fine. Yeah, that's all fine. Got two screws here on the side. These should still be Loctited in. It feels like they are. Finally, we put the rear. Get that hammer out of the way. And like all good crescent cuts, let's rock it to make sure it settles in. I'm starting to realize I basically don't Loctite anything. And really, I should. But I take these scopes off and put other ones on so darn often that that'd be a lot of Loctite I'd be using. All right, let's check the scope. Eye relief is good. A little off center. Let's just turn that reticle a smidge. Nice. Now this scope too is offset because it's a top eject, which always does feel a little bit odd to me. I mean, it shoots great, the scope works, so just fine. But having it off center, boy, does that take some getting used to. But hey, it's top eject, what are you gonna do? Now this would be a fun one to go hunting with. Pretty light. Holds a good number of rounds. And even though I was complaining about how it was grabbing onto the case rims, it just doesn't quit. It's a good old rifle. Okay, on to the next one. We're going to do the 74. Wherever I put that. There you are. And then we'll leave that 94 for later. Now, 74 is a lot easier to take apart than the 85 high wall, but I am definitely going to need Chris to help hold against that spring. Okay, we'll take it as far as we can. Okay, audio's going. We didn't mess it up last time. That's good news. Now the sharps. This is a big boy. This is just a darn hefty rifle. I think of all the rifles you've seen today, this is the heaviest. Even more so than the 85 high wall. This probably weighs as much as the 85 plus that scope, and this doesn't even have a scope on it. Still, taking it apart, a little bit easier. There's a pin here. Push that down out of the way, give that a turn. Now we just pull this. Gonna want to squeeze that up in there, try and take some of the spring pressure off. Of course, it's not cooperating with me. Oh my goodness. Ah. Nice. This too has one of those extractor bars that you need the very professional wiggle until it falls out technique. Although this time, it did its wiggling for me. Now this firing pin is not held in by any screws. There's this like pressure plate here. And there's not exactly a great way to remove that. So I found that the sight pusher tool used on certain handguns just works beautifully. I mean, I'm probably not using it how it's intended, but when it works. Now, let's get this all fastened in. I'm going to need almost all of the room to fit this block. Then I just use that little tail piece that's sticking up, and I let that grab that plate. There we go. Now, I hope I didn't settle it on too deeply. If so, I got to reset all that. But let's see. Feeling lucky. Yeah, looks like we're good. I just got to slide it over enough so that the connector that goes from where the hammer strikes all the way down to the firing pin will finally touch. They're clear, anyway. There we go. Then I'll have to do that in reverse to get it settled in. I mean, it's really quite an unusual setup for how that firing pin is connected. There's this weird Tetris piece kind of block. You hit one side of it and the other side pushes the firing pin. So this one's probably not great to dry fire, come to think of it. I'm not actually really sure. And though it's not great, it may not be great to dry fire, it is amazing to regular fire it. There we go. Let's make sure that clears. Yep, good depth on that firing pin. Now we got to get this plate back in there. I don't want to hammer it. I've hammered it in the past and it actually just kind of dented the lip. I'm not very proud of that. So I'll just push it from the other way. You know, it's working on old rifles like this that have really made me appreciate that there have not actually been stupendously large advancements in firearms mechanics in quite a while. Like this mechanism, it's simple, it's a little weird, but it just works so perfectly. Nowadays there's a lot more semi-auto options, aside from that, I mean, a lot of these mechanisms, they were figured out quite some time ago. Oh, I don't have the clearance. Okay, guess we're hammering. Actually, let's just try a dry push first. Ugh, get as far as we can. That's pretty close. Now we can finish it off. But really, not a whole lot of moving parts. They all just kind of work. And do with a little smidgen more. Now this rifle, I really want to take to a 1,000-yard shoot sometime. The bore in it is certainly in better shape than that 85. The 85 is a little bit oversized. So the normal rounds for 45-70, the bullet's got a diameter of like 4.58. 4.58 barely flies in the 85. I mean, I have seen things just a slight bit undersized that, I mean, it'll tumble before it reaches 50 yards. It's unbelievable. But the Sharps here, doesn't care. It just keeps right on hitting. There we go. Very special wiggle technique to get that extractor in place. Now, I'm going to try, yeah, there's just no way I'm going to be able to get this in. I need both hands just to get that lever in place. Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, yeah, time to grab Chris. Unless, I wonder, could I... Oh, goodness. That took some force. Nice. Okay. That was unexpected. That's all looking good. Now this had the long scope on it. There's a lot of little moving parts in there. So let me rearrange a little bit. Then we'll go ahead and get this long scope mounted up. And this is the new one with the direct dovetail mounts. So we're not going to be using the two forward holes you might find on Pedersoli rifles or if you get it drilled and tapped yourself. This is just going to go straight into the dovetails and have a scope that slides. Which I gotta be honest, I'm very fond of. Until SHOT Show, I had not pulled the prototype off the 85 high wall. I love that thing. And now I'm going to be putting an actual production version on here, which, I mean, I like. Just the other one had, you know, the scars and whatnot of me putting it through the range and testing it. So, be right back. Alrighty. Now this particular setup, as you can see, is quite lengthy. And the audio is working. So let's leave that well enough alone. Yep. Yeah, it's going fine. Okay. So we got the Sharps here. We got the firing pin in. All the other screws. I mean, this rifle's practically pristine. I love this thing. I hardly want to shoot it except for all the times that I want to shoot it. So, this scope itself, we do definitely need to put some Loctite on there. Now, the bases, yeah, they're also going to need some Loctite. I didn't put anything in there before. We were pulling this apart for SHOT Show, and I basically broke all the Loctite. and put any back in. That's life. Yeah. Now this finally is going to force me to put an actual production run sliding direct dovetail mount onto this rifle. Before, like I mentioned, it had just been the prototype. Honestly, even the prototype was working great. And it doesn't have everything that the final version has. Arguably, the final version is much better. You know, you just get used to something. What are you gonna do? So we had this all packed up for shipping. Oh, bye-bye screw. Actually, no, I need that one. Gotta go get it. Okay. Got all the little bits and bobs. And I didn't pull the audio cable out. We're looking good so far. So, first step, oodles and oodles of Loctite on this sunshade here. Now, the last version that I had installed, I really wanted to be able to put it through its paces, so I put enough Loctite on there. It took us 3 people, 2 of which had wrenches, in order to get the sunshade off. And I'm not going to use nearly that much Loctite this time, and it was only the blue Loctite. If I had used the red, or heaven forbid, the green, it's never coming loose. Still, that's all right. So this is a 34-inch barrel, using the 9-inch sunshade, just making sure that's nice and tight. Because this slides and you pull it back into battery, it's really essential to have that fastened in properly. That way you don't accidentally unscrew it every time you bang the front ring into that stopper there. But it's on, it's good. We'll let that settle for a moment while I check these screws back here. Yep, thought so. I'm thinking, set up the bunny ears, finish the front setup, then come back and finish the rear. Feels good. But of course, yeah, you needed some Loctite. This is the set screw that goes right in the middle of that. So you go ahead and hold me there for a second, thank you. Now, sorted by accident, but this particular Loctite container, I cut the tip in properly. And so now I can just sort of use it as a brush, which honestly is a lot better than using it as drops. So I'm okay with that. Let's make sure you're centered-ish. Yeah, that's close enough. The windage is up front, and there's actually quite a bit of room, so I'm not too worried about getting this centered. I might use like spacer bars or a tail end of micrometer there, or calipers, sorry. But I think it'll be fine. Rear bunny ears here. And Loctite again. Amazed this bottle has survived as long as it did. I use so much of this stuff. Now, if any of you have brought one of these rifles out to compete in one of like the 1,000-yard shoots against modern rifles, I'd really love to hear that story. I have this dream of building a blunderbuss, mounting a red dot to it, then taking a lever action, putting one of the 3-power scopes on it, and then getting one of these rifles and bringing those to like, I don't know, all the different modern competitions. If I could get, I don't know, a revolver and a lever action and use that for some sort of 2-gun, handgun and rifle kind of thing. I mean, there's plenty of lever actions that come in pistol caliber. So that should work out pretty okay. Magazine size is going to be slow. I know I'm not going to beat time, especially with having to work that lever each time, but darn it, it would be so fun. Okay, let's go down here. I'll fix the alignment and the eye relief last. But for now, I mean, we tore that thing down at SHOT Show. And again, if you haven't been to SHOT Show, especially if you're not an exhibitor that has to tear down at the end, that last day, I mean, you've been on your feet for, what, 4 days? In the Las Vegas Convention Center. And at that point, you just want to get everything boxed up. And I know, we've all been there. So what I'm trying to say is, tear down is definitely not as neat and gentle as the initial setup or getting everything packed up to go. So some stuff just kind of got thrown in there. Kind of like this scope. It's definitely good to take everything apart and check it here. The actual assembly, not too terribly complicated, just got to be done in the right order. And these parts are quite difficult to break, so I'm not really worried about anything being stripped and whatnot. Almost done here. Friday is going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun because now we have to get all these rifles sighted in. And of course, we're going to want to double and triple check all those zeros, so I think it'll be a good idea to just bring far more ammunition than we think we could possibly shoot. Start at sunrise, go until sunset, just have a good day of it. All right. Now, eye relief wise, I know that's about right. Because I mean, I've set it up before. Really, we just got to check that it's level. And it is not. Okay. You know what? It's tall enough. You look like about that, maybe? Nope, one size off. So up here, there's this little ring, and it's got a sort of tail there. Tail lines up with the divot. And so you make sure that your reticle stays aligned when you pull it back in the battery. And likely because I threaded this into the scope slightly different than previously, it makes it a little bit out of line. So I just got to get that centered again. There we are. Okay, let's see where we're at here. That seems right. Now let's make sure you don't have a chance to rotate. Now I just got to get that lined up. Let's double check. That seems close enough. These I'm not going to Loctite. There's 3 of them. Really, it only has to handle the force of me pulling the scope back, which I don't really do all that hard. I'm not worried. You could Loctite them. It's not going to hurt anything. but not too much of a need here. The windage screws definitely don't want to lock tight. You're going to want to have those available so that you can change your windage. Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, that's almost all the rifles. The 94, I need to get some replacement parts for because, well, I looked into it and I definitely did break something that ought not to be broken. And the 92, there's another fellow who wanted to take a look at the insides of that. So I'm going to hold off on that and we'll just call it here for today. Got most of the rifles done. That's good. Only leaves 2 of them out. All right, I will set this rifle aside and then I'll be back in a second for the wrap-up. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoy fine old rifles and thank you for sticking around with me for this long. Now, if you don't enjoy fine old rifles, then I applaud your fortitude in getting through what I'm sure must be a couple hours by now. The Browning 92, we're going to leave that off till another date, but to be fair, it doesn't have a Malcolm scope on it, so I feel fine leaving that alone. And the other Winchester 94 needs some repairs done, so we'll leave that off as well. All things being said, I mean, we really love these old rifles, and we work with them quite often. That was a little look through of some of the rifles that we brought to SHOT Show, and I hope you saw something in there that catches your eye. For the other rifles that we have, and for the other strange setups that we do, go ahead and follow along with our YouTube channel, where we shoot a lot of rounds downrange and almost always hit the target. Pretty good percentage, I think. I'm not going to run those numbers. I'm feeling confident. In the meanwhile, take it easy out there, enjoy the rest of winter, and enjoy whatever it is you're shooting.